she talked about apprenticeships, how do people get them? And in a second, I'll let Kamrin introduce herself and talk about the apprenticeships and how do people get them. But I also want to tell Kamrin who this group of people is that you're looking at right now. And so since Kamrin was in our living room, we actually built our iOS and Android app. And now we have all of these amazing people coming from around the country who are taking the steps to learn how to code and break into tech. What's special about them is that every single person who's on the call now, they're actually squad leaders. So they're not just people who are learning how to code themselves, they're also helping other people. And some of them have groups as big as 140 people that they're leading and helping them study together, helping them just get better at coding. One sec. Get better at coding to break into tech. So with that said, I would love, Kamrin, for you to just introduce yourself, and then we'll open it up for an AMA so people can ask you questions about yourself, your story, and apprenticeships.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I can do a quick little intro. So my background, I worked at Dev Bootcamp for a number of years, and that was where I got my start in apprenticeships. That company had a ton of kind of history in developing people and looking at human development from a really informed perspective. And so it was just very rich in culture. And the folks out in Chicago who founded the company wrote a book by the O'Reilly team that like releases all those really amazing technical books. They released a book. I actually have a copy of it. I was going to send it to people if anyone wants one, but about apprenticeships, called Apprenticeship Patterns. And that kind of like set me off on trying to understand what apprenticeships were, because Chicago had so many companies that were hiring people from non-traditional backgrounds, and in the Bay Area it was, not happening. And so since many years ago when I started doing this, there's now been a huge proliferation of companies starting apprenticeship programs geared towards hiring folks from non-traditional backgrounds. And I've just been kind of like documenting all of it, trying to document who's doing it, why they're doing it, who's getting into the programs, how long they're in those programs, how those programs evolve, and that kind of thing. And primarily from my role as career coach. So I've seen I think around 500 non-traditional engineers go through their job hunts, mostly a couple of years ago. So I'd definitely be curious to see kind of like what's happening now. But yeah, that's kind of like a brief little sliver.
Yeah. And we're going to unpack and dive deeper into what apprenticeships are, because a lot of people are familiar with internships, but apprenticeships are a bit different. And I think the fact that you're a career coach and you have a lot of experience advising people on the job search, I think you'll definitely have a lot to say about the job search. I would love to maybe see if anyone has any questions for Kamrin, or maybe Kamrin, can you explain what apprenticeships are, and then we'll just let people ask you questions?
Yeah, totally. So you kind of mentioned internships. So the way that I like to delineate between apprenticeship and internship is essentially internships should be geared towards folks who just graduated from university. And there's this whole, wide group of people who are career changers, who are most likely older adults who are coming from a different career background, who, they've already had a salary, they've already had a job, they have a lot to offer, but they're not necessarily coming in with a ton of experience in the career that they're going into. And so apprenticeships aim to provide that internship-like experience where you can get a taste of, okay, so what is this company like? Do I want to stay here? They're going to, heavily onboard me so that I can really get up to speed quickly. Have that experience basically for folks who are career changers. And I will say there's a lot of folks out in the tech industry that do not know this difference. And so you'll see it used kind of interchangeably with internship. A lot of people don't know what apprenticeship is generally. So yeah, now you all know. That's
Yeah.
kind of
Can you talk about some of the companies, like to give people an idea, what types of companies offer these apprenticeships?
Yeah, so I have a little visual. If you go to my site, Apprenticeship.io, I have like a little logo kind of panel of all the companies, but it's like Airbnb, Lyft, Twilio, Uber, LinkedIn, Adobe, Amazon, Asana is one of the newer players that just got in. Dropbox too recently started one. Pandora, Slack has a really interesting one that's working with folks who are formerly incarcerated. So it's a lot. IBM is doing a lot of work also in this space. It's a lot of really cool companies. And then out in Chicago and in Ohio in the Midwest, they have a lot of smaller companies that are really kind of changing the game when it comes to, like, here in the Bay Area, you'll see a lot of people that say, you know, we don't have enough money or we don't have enough resources to do an apprenticeship, but the companies out in the Midwest kind of turn that whole idea on their head. So companies like 8th Flight and ThoughtBot, that might not be as well known in tech, but they're having huge apprenticeships and a ton of success. So yeah.
Yeah, and one last question before we open it up. Since you've helped so many people kind of find out about apprenticeships, do you think the people who are on the call tonight, they're 6 months away, 6 to 12 months away from graduating? Do you think there's actually actionable things that they can do now to prepare themselves to be kind of that ideal candidate for the apprenticeships in 6 months?
Totally. So there's a few things. The most common experience that I see for folks coming out of programs is this experience of wanting to continue to just dabble in different technologies. There's a book called Essentialism that talks about essentially distilling things down to its like most important form. And there's this image in the book that shows what energy looks like when you put it in every single direction a little tiny bit versus what your energy might look like if you just put it all in one singular direction, and like how far you can go if you just focus. And for me, like, it's always very obvious when someone is in a program or about to graduate who's doing the like dabbling continually forever and just kind of moving like this versus the person that like really has a direction in mind and knows where they want to be. So I guess my advice would be, as much as you can, try to be the person that like goes in a direction as opposed to the person that just kind of dabbles in a bunch of different ways and does never really go anywhere. I can say I've done kind of all paths, which is like dabbling, basically doing a double life. Most recently, I was in a part-time boot camp and founding my own company at the same time. And that was absolute chaos. Like, it's so hard to do both. And then now I'm kind of transitioning to trying to do my own like full-time immersive kind of like sabbatical. And I can just say, like, whatever you decide, try to stick with it and just like stay in that direction and go. Having to like switch from dabbling to like living a double life to like doing all these different things has been really like emotionally hard for me. And so like some people don't necessarily have the chance to just do an immersive program. And so I've been there, like it's hard to stay committed. But just, I guess, stick with it. And then on like a tactical kind of point of view, there's really three things that these companies are asking if you're looking at the big tech companies in the Bay Area especially. So, your Lyft, your Uber, your Twilio, your LinkedIn, almost all of these companies are asking candidates three questions, and they're very deeply evaluating the essays that they receive from candidates. So a lot of them are really not looking at resume as like the main kind of point of concern for evaluating a candidate. They're really wanting to see, can this person articulate in a unique way what value they're going to bring to the company, and doing that in more of like an open form. So, I've been on the evaluating side of these applications, and there are some patterns, which I'll get into, but the three questions are, one second, I have notes to make sure I get them right. A project that you've worked on recently that you're proud of. And always with that kind of question, like a candidate who incorporates the technology that the company is using is going to stand out more than a candidate that doesn't use like the API or whatever technology that company might produce. So definitely try to talk about a project that uses their technology. And then there's typically always a question about what's your personal journey into technology, or what's your personal journey just more broadly. And I would say this is the one where people start to stand out a lot. I can just share from my own experiences being an evaluator for the Pandora apprenticeship. You'll see a lot of people who will say things to the effect of, you know, I played with HTML and CSS in MySpace, and I didn't realize that that was coding, and I, you know, was told not to go into computer science, or I, you know, had some other opportunity, even though I had an interest in computers, no one ever told me to do it. There's that kind of like narrative that starts to form, and then, you know, then however that person came back to be in technology, that is just a very, very common way of describing the journey. So what I would really, really highly advise to folks who are looking at these programs is think beyond just like summarizing your journey. Because if you do that kind of like broad strokes summarizing like how you got into technology, it's just really starts to sound the same. And instead I would drill into an experience that you have that makes you super unique. So I can give a few examples of that. I coached someone into the Uber apprenticeship who is a former professional modern dancer, and she has an incredible way of talking about how for her dancing and coding feel like incredibly similar. That like is super unique. Like if she ignored that component of her life and focused on what brought her back into technology, it might be a different kind of story. Or there's another Dev Bootcamp alumni out in Chicago who's a former butcher, and she like you definitely want to bring in these experiences in your life, and positive or negative, like things that you went through that were really tough, but that really make you who you are. That's what you want to bring out. So basically, summary, TLDR, don't be afraid to be vulnerable in that personal story essay. And then the third one being like, why do you want to work for us? Like, why LinkedIn? Why Twilio? Why Pinterest? And that one you can also really tell who gives a shit and who doesn't. Like it's usually pretty clear that this person either you know, wants to work there because it's a big tech company and it just sounds nice and they want a good salary, versus like, I've deeply looked into what this technology is doing, why it's valuable. I know who the customers are. I know what value is being delivered here. And I really see myself here because of XYZ culture or XYZ person, or, you know, whatever it might be. Just really dig into like specifically that company in whatever way you can. So yeah, those are like on a kind of like tactical level, the three like essays that you're going to see when you apply.
Wow, Kamrin, my mouth dropped. This is one of the greatest tactical advice that I think any of the guests has shared, like step by step, what people need to do to just get a job at some of the greatest tech companies. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
I took some notes too on the side, so I'll share it with the people in the Career Karma app afterwards. But I think
I have a deck too. I can send it over.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. Cool. And I think this is a good segue to just open it up for questions. We have about 30 people on the call now, all squad leaders. I think some people may not even realize this, but you all have unbelievable stories to tell. And I think this is just the beginning of you like hearing that this is possible and like what opportunities exist out here. You all can create your own story over the next 6 months too. So just know that it's all about turning your perceived disadvantages into advantages, and you all have each other, and you all have amazing stories to get these apprenticeships in 6 months. So yeah, when I open it up for questions.
I had a question. I'm sorry for my voice. I had my tooth pulled today. I just had a
Hope you're feeling
question.
okay.
Yeah, I'm just swollen. But the book that he mentioned, is that available at Barnes and Noble or on the Nook app?
I would imagine Barnes and Noble would have it. Do you want me to send you a copy? I have 3 copies. I was gonna try to do like a quiz or something to give them away, but if you need a copy, I have a few. Or maybe I can send them to Timur.
That would be awesome.
Cool. Okay.
Maybe I'll put you guys in touch, Kamrin and Lauren. Maybe I'll connect you two so you can share the copy. And maybe Lauren, once you're done reading it, you can summarize it or share your notes with the rest of the squad.
I totally will. You know that.
Awesome.
Cool.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
The question I have, like, I am 42. This is my third. This will be my third, and what I say is my final career change. I'm leaving education with a background from business marketing and stuff like that. I get kind of nervous because you hear so many really young kids like jumping into this stuff. Is there a way for me to like really play up my other skills, my other experience?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, yeah, there's a few ways. It depends on what kind of engineering you end up wanting to do. I recommend there's like kind of 2 ways. So one way would be to look at companies specifically in the field that you used to work in. So it sounds like we're a former educator, then trying to narrow down tech companies that are really addressing different issues in education. And then by default, you can kind of empathize with the people that you're building for because you've probably experienced what they've experienced, or you kind of just know the ins and outs of that experience or that industry. And that would be kind of like sticking with the software engineer role proper, and just building great software for people because of the experiences that you've had and the knowledge that you have. And then the other option that I've also coached a lot of folks towards is combining your software engineering skill set with the background that you have. Especially this tends to work for folks who really like want to utilize their people skills. And, when you end up doing 40-hour work weeks as a software engineer, I've had a number of folks come back over the years and be like, coding's great, but I miss talking to people, or I miss like interacting. Is that a big head nod? Yeah. Okay.
I'm very sociable.
So looking at what I call like the blended engineering careers, and that might be something like customer success engineering, or support engineering, or even sales engineering. So basically in companies, there's like needs to talk to the customer, find out what kind of software they need, and then immediately spin up like a kind of like test environment to be able to sell to the client. And those kinds of roles will allow you to use kind of not only the technical skills that you have, and also the people skills that you want to use. Another really cool role that a lot of people don't know about is called developer advocates. So this is kind of a tech company's way of making roles that are marketing and software engineering together. So a developer advocate will go out to hackathons or go to the company's conference and help other developers build using their API. So it's kind of a really interesting mix, I think, of like education, you're teaching other developers how to use your technology, and then also marketing, because your job is to get people to use something. You have to like move people. And then it's still using software engineering. And honestly, some of the salaries that I've seen that are the biggest have been developer advocates. So I think there's a lot of stigma about these kind of blended roles that you're going to make less money. And that can be the case, but it's not always the case by any means. And a lot of the time, people are much more happy when they are using their full skill set. So it just depends kind of like what works for you.
Thank you so much.
This is great, Kamrin. People, keep your questions coming.
I have a question. So do you start off at a different, like if you go into a company with the apprenticeship, would it be starting off with a substantially lower pay? I know that is going to be lower, but is it like half of what you'll be making as a regular software engineer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So short answer is no. Depending on where you are. So out here in the Bay Area, the salaries can be, you know, 100,000 to 120,000 is like, I by no means want to say like average or normal, but that is something that like is possible for people if you like really, really work hard with your interviews. In the Midwest, I would say and like even in New York too, I would see closer to like 75, 80, 85 being kind of like the range that we would come in. And so, yeah, the short answer is no, the compensation is not different when you do an apprenticeship first. I will say though, because you are typically some form of like contract engineer or like contract employee, you're not necessarily going to get the same benefits always. Almost all of them have healthcare, because everyone I think knows right now like healthcare is so important. But specifically equity is something that for that 6-month time period, you might not get a package that has the equity. So that's kind of like the compensation difference that might be a little bit different, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kamrin, real quick, can you talk about how the onboarding process into the company is different for people who just go into like an entry-level role versus an apprenticeship? Because I know companies that have apprenticeship, they actually create these like unbelievable like mentorship programs too, right? Yeah. So can you just talk a little bit about advantages of being part of an apprenticeship?
Yeah, so it varies from company to company, and I think it's pretty widely known at this point, and I'll just like be honest in saying like tech companies are not known to be very good at emotional labor and understanding how to value and treat people sometimes. So there's a wide range of experiences between company to company in terms of how they're going to treat you when you're onboarded. But I would say some of the like really great examples would be like Twilio's apprenticeship. They have folks doing 3 months worth of projects for their nonprofit org, Twilio.org. And so you're building projects for nonprofits in order to get used to the tech stack, to get used to their technology. And then your second half of your, and that's just with your cohort mates also. And you have a teaching engineer who is working with you day to day, kind of like bringing you up to speed. And so it's just like a very unique group environment. It's very similar to the boot camp experience also, because you have your cohort, you have your like instructor, for lack of a better term, and you're being kind of like brought through. And then some companies like LinkedIn just, you know, they have incredible infrastructure for their learning and development team. So you can, you know, take classes with LinkedIn Learning, and there's, I mean, LinkedIn has a really great program in that you get to meet kind of like the head of engineering who is really supportive and kind of spearheading LinkedIn Reach. And even like my apprentices from the first cohort sent photos of meeting the CEO of LinkedIn. And really the whole company is involved in the process of bringing on amazing apprentices at LinkedIn. So that's like a selection of what it's like. Microsoft Leap is another one that's out in Washington. They're honestly bringing in, I think, the most apprentices of any company. And that whole experience, to my knowledge, is actually like its own like location, and you're actually part of like 50 folks who are all non-traditional all together, and you're going through a complete unique experience, almost like just you all, and then getting to build projects together. So it varies kind of like in the style that folks get onboarded, but for the most part, these companies are really putting in a lot of effort. There's always a mentor that you're tagged up with. Sometimes you'll also have like a buddy who will help you kind of like figure out the corporate politics and landscape. You'll get like matched up with someone who's there to advocate for you. So yeah, a lot of these companies are really, really thoughtful.
Great. That's a great overview. Cool. What about everyone else? Any other questions? Don't be shy.
Please don't be shy.
Yeah, I have a question. I apologize. I had to go to focus on normally. But out of curiosity, what were some of the? I know you talked about more of the positive in general, but what were some of the hurdles that you see that's consistent to actually pay attention to, and maybe some solutions to be able to overcome them?
The hurdles that I see engineers encountering?
Yeah, encountering and getting into the apprenticeships, as well as once you actually land the position.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. I don't think there's a lot of great information about how to do a good job hunt out there in the world. So when I mentioned kind of people dabbling a lot versus like directing their energy, for me, I found, sorry.
Oh, my bad. I thought I had my phone muted. I just said it right.
Oh, no worries. And so a lot of the first month that I would work with folks was always just spent like, okay, this is going to be a waste of your time. Just do this kind of thing. And a lot of what that revolves around is the belief that you can just apply cold online and get a job. Today, I would say like the likelihood that you're going to hear back from a company, let alone hear back from a company on any sort of like time frame in which like you can make rent and like keep your life going, like it's just not going to happen. You can't rely on a company to like work on your time frame. So anything you can do to develop skills to do kind of like cold outreach, where you're sending really nice emails, where you're saying like, hey, I saw this, GitHub repo of yours, or I saw this talk that you did at a conference, like complimenting them, like just sending things like that to get folks to hopefully refer you. That's like a game changer. The stat that I always throw out there in a lot of my workshops is a lot of people don't know, recruiters will typically go through about 150 cold applications for every one hire, and they'll typically end up going through like 7 before they get a hire from referrals. So the quality of candidates that referrals are providing for companies is just so much better, and it saves the recruiter a lot of time. And so if you're not taking advantage of trying to get a referral, whether that's like showing up at these career fairs that folks are doing, just like showing your face, getting to know people, that like figuring that part out, I feel like is half the battle. Because what I see people do is they'll take this, like, I call it the spray and pray. They'll just like spray applications all over wherever they can, to the point that like a lot of folks that I've worked with when they're in their first month of their job hunt, they like can't even recall where they applied. I'll ask them like, so how many applications have you done, and like to where? And like, oh, like I think I've done like 100, but I like don't even know where I applied to, what the titles of the roles were, like what the job description was. And that's just, it's like such a telltale sign that the job hunt is going to take forever. Because I think the other thing that people don't think about is like, so if for every 150 applications, there's one hire, that means like it wasn't necessarily you. So basically, if you try to do this like spray and pray approach, you're going to go through 150 different like iterations of applying 150 times. And that's how many applications you need to put out to like theoretically be successful. Whereas if you do seven referrals 7 times, i.e. 49 referrals, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to have a job. Like if someone comes to me and they say, I've done 50 referrals and I haven't gotten a job, that's when I say like, you can totally say that you have had an unjust job hunt because you have done the work. That is the work right there. And I think people don't like think about what makes things most effective and productive. They just think like, oh, if I apply to 150 jobs, I'm going to get interviews. But it's a lot more than just like, I apply to 150 jobs and then things work out.
And this is so true. And how many people heard Ruben, myself, or Arthur talk about going through the back door instead of knocking on the front door? Have people heard about it on the Blueprint workshop? Basically, what Kamrin is pointing out is that like your college counselors might be telling people to go create a resume, create a cover letter, and apply online. The reality in the 21st century is very different. Companies are using algorithms to screen for keywords. They're like, it's rare that a recruiter will actually look at someone's resume, and when they do, they only have like 10 to 20 seconds to make a decision whether to like select it. And most likely their eyes go directly to the experience. And if a person doesn't have experience at a other tech company, they have no way of evaluating if you're a qualified candidate or not. And so I want to just emphasize that during your job search, you can just reach out to 5 people a day. And that's why we say use your alumni base for your coding bootcamp. If you're a veteran, go on LinkedIn and find other veterans who are in tech. If you're a teacher, identify other teacher like Iris Nevins, who was on the call last week, who's in.
Oh, Iris is one of my students.
I loved. Yeah, Iris was. She was the previous guest speaking to the squad leaders 2 weeks ago. But
she's badass.
She is, and she's now doing so much with her new skills, and she moved to Atlanta, and yeah, and basically just like you gotta be savvy. You gotta do the exact opposite of what everyone else is doing. If everyone is applying online, don't apply online, you know? And this advice couldn't be more true. Kamrin, when it comes to apprenticeships, I think one of the downsides of apprenticeships is they're super competitive, right? Yeah. Usually there's like 300, usually companies cap the number of applications they'll receive, because in the first 10-20 minutes, whenever they open up the applications, they get like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And what advice do you have for people to either stand out or go through the back door when applying for apprenticeships?
Yeah, so I will say the good thing about a lot of these apprenticeships is that they are trying to make it more fair. So a lot of them don't accept referrals necessarily, which is, it's an interesting way of tackling the problem, to say the least. I've definitely like debated with apprenticeship program managers on like, wait, we're just like trying to get folks to like go through the back door, and now you're gonna like eliminate the back door. So keep that in mind. A lot of these apprenticeship programs won't really accept referrals, or it won't function the same way as it would for a regular job. So the way that you stand out is, again, by having an amazing story and essay that you've put a lot of thought into, having a great project that you've worked on. Hopefully that's a unique project also. Like a lot of bootcamp grads will come out and be like, this is my CRUD app. It's amazing. You know, it's a Yelp clone or it's an Airbnb clone. And it's, you know, it's been done. It's been done before. So try to be as much as you can passionate about whatever it is that you've made as kind of like a first step. And then second being like, try to make it something that hasn't been done before. And then utilize that technology too. But like, just to give folks a glance into like what this actually looks like, we would literally sit down with folks writing and score them on a rubric. So like, if you mention like 5 meetups that you've been to, or if you reference, like, a lot of it's numbers based. So if the number, like the amount that you expound upon and try to talk about what you've done and how many, you know, different things you've tried, oftentimes you'll get more points, so to speak, on these rubrics for that thoroughness and for that passion, and often for that like grit too. So when you talk about adversity or things that you've been through, and you show people like, this is my life story, and this is what I've been through, it's that's when you start to stand out. And it's often, for me as a coach, it can be quite invasive, because I'm like, tell me what you've actually been through. Don't like just sugarcoat your life. Like, you've been through some stuff. Everyone's gone through stuff. And a lot of what these apprenticeships are trying to, I think what they want to see is a lot of that vulnerability. And so, yeah, when I'm looking at essays, I'm always just like, don't like sugarcoat it. Don't make it sound like everything was a cakewalk. I want to know who you are, because like when you're sitting there with that rubric and you're sitting there with like 10 or 15 or in some cases 100 essays, like you want to be there with the person. You want to like feel what they've felt.
Yeah, you wanna get your emotions triggered. Like,
yeah.
What you should shoot for is like, make the person reading your application kind of get teary and emotional, to be like, I can't believe this person has gone through this, and they overcame so much adversity, and like now they're just like hungry, and they're gonna succeed with me or without me, right?
Yeah.
Kamrin, let me ask you this. So, as I said earlier, there's a lot of people on this call who are squad leaders.
Mm-hmm.
What a squad leader's role entails is pretty much motivating, guiding, and helping people kind of in their groups or like under them also succeed. Do you think that's one of the things that could make someone stand out in their essays, mentioning that they're a squad leader helping others succeed?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Any stories that you can share from your experiences with Career Karma or at your boot camp, helping others or teaching or, you know, going to meetups and helping others, it's always going to be a standout kind of thing. Primarily because I think, especially in the more traditional engineering spheres, there's not as much emphasis, I think, on interpersonal skills, and that is oftentimes non-traditional engineers' kind of like sweet spot, is that, you know, you've been a project manager before, or you've worked in customer service for many years, and so you've dealt with people. You know how to really like lead and take care of people and make people be seen. And so, yeah, definitely dial that, you know, that skill up and document those stories too. I think one of the things that I wish I would have done more over the years is kind of take little snapshot notes of like those moments, because even when you interview later on, for like your first role or your second role, you're going to be referencing some of these stories for like what will be the like rest of your career potentially. And so you want to like know what those stories are and make sure that you kind of have the details in your mind so you can say them over and over and over again in interviews and that kind of thing.
Awesome. Let's see. We have about 10 minutes left. So I know there's a lot of people with a lot of questions. So anyone else wants to go next?
Okay, they're taking too long. The question I had, I sent it to you on Career Karma, was to, like I hear a lot about Atlanta, I hear a lot about LA, I hear a lot about, as far as New York, their hubs, and are you hearing anything about the South as far as their tech industry growing, blooming?
Yeah, I've seen a lot coming out of Atlanta. The startup that I co-founded is doing an apprenticeship in Atlanta with Pandora. So worth keeping an eye on that one. And then IBM has a number of positions that they hire for in North Carolina. Not totally.
Houston specifically.
Houston specifically? Okay. Not that I know of off the top of my head, but this is kind of part of the movement, I would say. So one of my former students, Jenna, she got hired in Austin for IBM. So at least, you know, a little bit of hiring happening in Texas, but I haven't heard of Houston. But she basically flies back to Detroit with like resources from companies. So she'll get paid by Twilio to go to Detroit to like spread the word and do meetups and stuff like that. And I think she's actually gotten a number of companies to start to hire from Detroit, which is her hometown. So this is not by any means what I want to say, because that's work and you should be paid to do it. But part of what I've had to learn, I think, over the years is like, you're an educator like still in this process. There's a lot of recruiters out there that don't know this language, that don't know that these programs exist. And so part of it is kind of like realizing where we are, I think, in the bigger arc of hopefully all companies starting to do this and having it be what I call industry standard. Like it should just be accepted that this is normal, but we're not there yet. And so in some instances, it's like, you kind of have to advocate for yourself and create a position for yourself. And so if there's companies in Houston that you think would benefit from apprenticeship, I'm happy to give you resources if you are at career fairs or things like that to basically kind of get them to do it. Because you can just get hired that way, to be honest. If you really want to do an apprenticeship and all you need is like resources about the benefits for a company, just email me and I can try to help. But I don't want to try to say like this is so common and like it's happening everywhere. Like you'll just find one. It's pretty unique still. So hopefully
how can I get that information from you? That was but thank you.
Okay, yeah. I also have a podcast, just a plug. It's on Spotify and the podcasts, Apple Podcasts. So if you search Apprenticeship.io, there's like, I think 4 stories that I've put out so far of folks who I've worked with. And would definitely be curious to get anybody's feedback about it. But that can also be something that you send to employers to say like, hey, this is a real thing. Like you should listen to. That's honestly what I spent the first like couple of years doing, was just peer pressuring companies. It's basically like, Uber has an apprenticeship lift. Why don't you? And that to be honest, that's like literally what I spent probably a year doing, and it's turned out like companies have started to really like build more of these programs. But I don't want to make it seem like it is easy or like it just happens. magically.
Where can I access these resources that you have? Because I like that idea of reaching out to people even as early as now, just to try to start at least having that dialogue with them.
Yeah, totally. I can connect you with Jenna because she's like really wanting to travel and promote apprenticeship, and she's in Austin anyway. She's like relatively close, and she could come from IBM and kind of talk about apprenticeship. If you know of anyone who's running a meetup in your local community. And then I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, you can check out the podcast, and then my email is just cam@apprenticeship.io, and I can send resources also. I have a number of blog posts kind of queued up that I just have been not releasing for whatever reason. And so that can also be a reason for me to just press publish.
Please.
Yeah, and I just dropped your Twitter as well if people want to follow you, because I know sometimes you make tweets about upcoming apprenticeships too, right?
Yeah, I try to.
Hey Cam, what's your can you hear me?
Yep.
What is your meetup group name for the ones that you're affiliated with in Atlanta?
Oh, so the company is called onramp.io.
OnRamp?
Yeah, OnRamp, ONRAMP.io. And then the partnership is specifically with Pandora Music. And I know that Sirius XM also has, I think that's their headquarters. So Sirius just acquired Pandora earlier this year. So they would be a company in Atlanta that I would think should do apprenticeship.
Okay.
Like should already be doing. But yeah, unfortunately in that process I didn't get to go to Atlanta. I really, really wanted to go. So that I can learn more about the tech industry there. So sadly I don't have a ton of resources for Atlanta specifically, but I do know that Pandora is running theirs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey Timur, hey Cameron, it's Jennifer. I got a quick question. Now that I'm like transitioning and figuring out that this is what I want to do, I kind of get caught up, and I don't know if you can consider this like imposter syndrome or not, but I have this thing that I call new car, my car, regarding like, hey, you get a new car and then you've never seen it before until you start driving it. So I kind of feel that way about now that I'm into the tech world. Maybe it's just like the affiliation with so many people who are passionate about it, but it's almost like I feel like as soon as I get in the door, there's going to be like this bubble that pops. Do you feel like that's a real thing, or is that just like a part of what we've all been calling imposter syndrome?
What do you mean there's a bubble that's going to pop?
Meaning like this influx of amount of like qualified people, and then all of a sudden there's too many of us. And then like now we've got the skill and now we got to go learn something else. I don't know. I'm just fearful because I've been so passionate about it. I'm like, oh my God, this is great. I want to get in. For me, maybe it has something to do with that I still have contract time left because I'm active duty, and that as soon as I'm done with my boot camp and I'm ready to start rolling, that the ball is going to be so far down the road that I can't catch up and kick it. So I'm just wondering, do you feel like there's going to be a point where there's a bubble that pops, like, all right, there's too many guys, and now all of it is for
so there's a couple things. I think there's like one issue being that tech companies aren't hiring enough non-traditional candidates, and so there's a lot of folks just out there looking for roles that I think are not being deeply considered, and that I think is more of like a systemic issue that I have spent a lot of time thinking about. But I think as candidates, like, you have to just convince yourself that it's going to work out, and that can be the absolute hardest thing. I have sat in that bathroom right there and like cried on the floor, just like totally devastated, like gotten in my bathtub and exfoliated my skin because I just wanted to like feel something, and like, oh my God, I'm so terrified about this. Like is it gonna work out? Like, are people gonna be okay? And I've found that like I'm not really productive when I'm that anxious and terrified about these kind of like systemic issues that are largely out of my control. And so I'm there with you. And so yeah, I would try to not think about, you know, the bigger problems that we have with hiring, and instead just try to focus on like, I need to get in. I'm gonna get in through a back door, or I'm gonna meet a lot of amazing people, and I'm not gonna give up. And just kind of distill it down to just like your own experience. And I can also just say, having been around people in the tech industry for many years who are like, I mean, I started out in the tech industry as an event organizer at hackathons, and it was like the definition of like faking it until I made it. I did not know that there's a difference between Java and JavaScript. I thought they were the same thing. I was like, why are people naming these things different? I didn't know the difference between Ruby and Ruby on Rails, and I would sit down with developers and just be like, what are you doing? And that's, I think that's, to varying degrees, a lot of people's experience is just like faking it until you make it. And I wouldn't be ashamed of that. The other saying that I've heard a lot of people start to use is hone it until you own it, which I think is even better for this imposter syndrome kind of topic. Is like, everyone, including, so my partner works in tech. He's been a software engineer for like 3 years now. He has a computer science degree. He comes home on a regular basis and is like, I am so overwhelmed. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm not very productive. So I think also a portion of it is just recognizing that like, this is the work of technologists, is this feeling of like, kind of low-grade anxiety of like, I don't feel like I'm good enough. The technology is so much better than me. It's moving so fast. I can't keep up. Like, I think that that's one, what makes it really exciting. It makes it really high paid too, like that you can be the kind of person that just like keeps going and like has the attitude of just like, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna like fail like 18 times and get like 16 ugly error messages I don't understand, and I'm gonna keep going. Like, that's what you're getting paid for. You're getting paid to like deal with that, because other people can't handle it. It's so overwhelming. So like, I think give yourself a pat on the back. Like, you're in it. You're like trying to navigate. You're getting there. But I think part of it's like accepting that this is just like the work, you know?
It's just like the new normal for this industry.
Yeah. It's the new normal, like, because the internet is just wild, you know?
Yeah, I would also add,
Jennifer,
that the way you're feeling, it's totally normal. During those times, remind yourself that you only need one job, right? You don't need hundreds of thousands of jobs. You just need one job, and there's always going to be a company that's looking for engineers, right? And in this process, when I was in the job search, I always felt like maybe I should not apply to my top companies because I'm going to run out of companies to apply for. And that's also like a false, like you kind of put pressure on yourself thinking that, oh, I'm going to run out of companies that are hiring, when in reality, there's thousands and thousands of companies that need engineers. And so what I like to do, and I shared one link to Crunchbase, and I'm just posting another link. This link has a list of companies that just recently raised funding. So they raised money to grow their ideas. And every time you feel hesitant, just go to that list and realize that no matter what happens, there's thousands of companies that just raised millions of dollars, and they're going to need engineers to build those apps, you know? And since they're new companies, they're going to have to compete and try to steal engineers from either existing companies or hire people out of boot camps and train them so they can be building apps. And that's why this is such a great career for people, because you have leverage, because there's not enough people who know how to code these days. So just trust your struggle. You only need one company. If you start feeling that, just recognize it, go on Google and find a list of thousands of companies that are hiring and start sending their people messages to get through the door.
I can really appreciate that, because like this week has really been kind of discouraging. I'm like, golly, man, there's so much to do and I feel like there's not enough time. Maybe this is just something that I don't know. I guess this is a part of like the ebb and flow that everybody talks about. You go through, I guess, your story and your struggle. So thank you, Kamrin, and thank you, Timur, for the reassurance.
Yeah.
Cool.
Part of
So
the process.
we're about to wrap up. Kamrin, let me ask you another question. What can you share with us, like, what drives you? You're doing a lot of work to help others. Can you like share a little bit about kind of what makes you get up in the morning? What types of impact and change are you trying to make?
Yeah. I, from a young age, became an underdog, like by force, not by choice. And I always felt really overlooked, specifically taking a lot of advanced classes and feeling like I, what was supposed to be done to get into a really great college, and then not getting into the place that I wanted to go, because I had taken too many challenging classes at the time. So my GPA was lower. So I felt like, oh, I played the game, but I didn't play the game correctly. And I challenged myself too much and now I'm screwed. And I remember thinking just like, this is so ridiculous. Like, people have so much more potential than a lot of these like application systems like college or, like the job hunt process. Like, it's very simplistic. It doesn't see you for like everything that you are. And that those rejections, I think, continue to drive me even now. Like, I can be very fierce towards advocating for other people because of my own experiences, feeling so inadequate and feeling just like, well, what's the point? Like, what's the point of continuing forward if I work so hard and I like can't make it? So I get a huge thrill, I think, out of seeing people who are like, I'm like Iris. Oh my God. I remember Iris showing up on my couch. It might have actually been this couch. When Dev Bootcamp shut down, I got the couches from Dev Bootcamp. It literally might have been that couch. Iris sits down and she's like, I'm gonna make it. And I was like, I've so many people, like, I really, like, I want you to try to apply to so many places, and like, but she was like, I'm doing this and it's gonna be amazing. And she just knew it from the moment that she sat down. And she's a standout person in that regard. It's like, she just knew, like, she's like, I'm going this direction. Nothing is going to stop me. And I think just witnessing that, it gets me so excited to see people not only struggle, because I've also been there with people crying and like even having, jobs not work out and getting laid off and like shit hitting the fan for people, like being there in those moments to say, hey, like, I'm going to pick you up off the floor. Like, it's going to be okay. This is not the end. Like, it's going to work out for you. Because that's also a part of it too, is like not giving up. But yeah, it's like, I think for me, what motivates me is just seeing people recognize the potential that they have and invest in themselves. Because I think a lot of time for me, I've struggled with like, how much do I invest in myself? How much do I advocate for myself? And when you see people who just are like, I'm going for it. I might fail, but I'm going for it. Like, that's life. Like, there's nothing more than that you can ask for. It's like, I'm going to try to do something amazing. So, yeah.
Awesome. Kamrin, that's really great. And I just want people to maybe unmute yourselves and let's give Kamrin a round of applause for such an amazing talk.
You're amazing.
Oh, you guys
learned a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you are going to apply, like I said, my email is just kam@apprenticeship.io. I'll send a little summary deck to Timur, and then check out my podcast too. It has some cool stories. And if you want to send me your essays, if you're applying to apprenticeships, I'm totally down to review.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we do a workshop in a few months where people can come in, and it will be like the second part of this meeting where you can give people ideas on how to tell their story. To get those apprenticeships. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kamrin, for taking the time to speak to us. I want to just say thanks to all the squad leaders for finding the time in your busy lives to also not just help yourself, but help throw the rope back to people behind you. This is starts now. Like, helping people starts now. You don't have to wait until you're 2 years through the journey to help people behind you. And there's always going to be someone who's a few steps ahead of you and helping you. And that's why even the people on this call tonight, some of you are going to get jobs before others. Some of you might learn about job hacks, job search hacks, and you might see something work for you. So we just encourage you to share it with others and just put that karma out there, and it will definitely come back to return for you in a bigger way. So thank you so much, Kamrin. This is amazing, and I'll share a lot of notes and PowerPoints that you sent over to me with everyone else.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much.
Thank you,
Will you
Kamrin.
send a link to this webinar?
Yep, I'll send the link. I'll upload it and share the link as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Kamrin, have a great night. CK, leaders, take care.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.